I want to give a really great intro to everyone listening on Mallory Rowan. I feel like a creepy stalker because I have watched you from Ottawa to Toronto, but here's the official bio, guys. So meet Mallory Rowan, a serial entrepreneur, real estate investor, and content creator who built $1 million net worth by the age of 29. Congratulations. That's a big win. At 22, she co-founded a global powerlifting apparel company that quickly scaled to six figures. We have here $350,000 annually. However, the intense hustle led to severe burnout, prompting her to refocus on sustainable business practices. Now, Mallory Rowan dedicates her career to helping entrepreneurs build successful ventures without sacrificing their well-being, which is perfect for this podcast because we talk about everything wealth and wellness. So in today's episode, I want to welcome Mallory sharing her powerful journey on building a thriving business while prioritizing her wellness, her strategies for scaling with authenticity, and the mindset shifts that helped her overcome burnout and create a life of balance and purpose. Welcome to the Wealthy Woman Podcast, Mallory.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
That was quite a bit of an intro. Now I just want to get into all of it.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so like I mentioned, I was creeping you. Okay, and I've seen you go from Ottawa to Toronto, and I kind of saw you, I think, on an Instagram post, and then I just got addicted to your content. Honestly, very relatable, very genuine. So how are you? What chapter of life are you in? What's your energy like?
We are in the build phase for sure. So definitely part of that move from Ottawa to Toronto. It just felt like the right energy for what we wanted right now, right pace for what we wanted. I really operate in seasons in every way, right? I always believe you can have a season of more rest, or maybe there's those in-between transition times. And then there's the times where you really go. And I think for us this year, that's I think of 2025 as my next chapter loading. I will look back at this year and think of all the seeds that got planted. So that's really where we are for me right now. I love falling asleep to the city skyline.
Wow.
It's giving the energy I need right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's the difference between Toronto and Ottawa?
So Ottawa is such a great city to live. It's a very balanced lifestyle. We're close to so much nature, which is really nice. Everyone's just a good vibe. I always say it's big city, small town feel. In terms of a entrepreneurial business, personal finance community, it takes you a while to find the people doing the cool things, right? I always say there's way more people doing interesting things in Ottawa than you would think. It's just very disjointed.
Yeah, I was going to say you shared on your story recently of some Ottawa events, and I was so surprised. I'm this is happening in Ottawa?
Yeah. I would always find that I would post a story at an event, maybe on a Friday night, and people would be how do I find out about these going on, right? So it's definitely in its come up of culture building, whereas in Toronto, there's just obviously so many people already established or doing new things. It's a lot more in the everyday air, if you will. So it's really cool to meet more people in my space. So much of my work is online. And it's this weird dynamic where you're very connected with people, but you're also always at home alone, right?
Very
so
true.
To actually have more of the in-person things, there's so many more events and connection opportunities here. So that's been really cool.
So that was strategical completely, Ottawa to Toronto, bigger opportunities, more people.
Yeah.
Okay, but was that hard? Moving here, I'm sure it was, but doesn't your partner and you also have a real estate business? So how did you transition that over?
Yeah. So for us, it was something, honestly, we had played with a few options. We'd been traveling a bit and
I saw you were in Portugal.
Yes. Obsessed with Portugal. But yeah, we got really excited by the idea of moving somewhere else. And for us, it's always dreaming big, but also looking at what makes the most sense, right? And as we looked at different options, different visa applications, things like that, moving within Canada was the most non-committal, right?
Okay.
Of you don't have to do all this crazy paperwork.
What were the other options? I'm curious.
We had loosely looked at Miami. We have a lot of friends there. And then we were thinking of more Europe, going somewhere like Portugal. We have a lot of friends with digital nomad visas in Portugal or Spain.
Yeah, me too. I know so many people that they think the life there for digital nomads is insane.
Yes. But it's a very different, slower life, which I love. But I was joking with my partner, I feel I need more of the push now. And then that's maybe a next one. But yeah, we love Toronto. We have a lot of connections here. We would coming to Toronto a lot already for events. So it just felt like a really nice next step. And also just logistically, it is closer to Ottawa. As you said, like we still have Ottawa ties, both with family, our real estate team there, and we have a cottage that we short-term rental as well. So
yeah, I watched those videos. We had a short-term rental that did not go so well.
Fair.
The pain of like starting and investing in real estate and, the different kinds of what you hear versus what it actually is.
Yeah. And for us, like we always look at those lifestyle choices. So even with buying the cottage, we really knew we wanted something like that for family memories for a long time. I grew up having a family cottage. And even when my partner Josh first came to it, he was just like, I would love for my family, his family, to experience more of that. They would go camping, and we really wanted to build that into our life. So looking at how are we able to do this, but not as the usual retirement era, right? A lot of people get a cottage when they're close to retirement or already retired. So for us, it was looking at, well, how do we do that? Okay, we could actually rent it out to help cover the mortgage so that we can have that experience. Whereas I think a lot of people do go into short-term rental as a cash business.
Me.
Right? Yeah.
Hands up.
Exactly.
Like I wish someone told me my real estate investing journey was so quick and like also so quick and market change and things happen. But like literally that was our thought process. Oh, let's get an Airbnb. We'll get cash flow like no tomorrow. And then cash flow was going out. Like we were investing money just to keep it alive. So yeah, totally. I think more education, more knowledge and understanding, which seems like you guys did have.
Yeah. So it's so much more of a business than, it gets this big rep for like could have crazy cash flow potential. But for us, that was what we were looking at is, hey, could this actually just cover our mortgage so that we can have those experiences with families? We can also dabble in a new space, right? To almost test out how does it feel to have a short-term rental business. So that was really fun, but obviously kept that Ottawa tie. And then you were asking about like our real estate team there. So I love big change.
Okay.
I'm like, I can't pick between like blue and purple for something, but I will just like get up and change my whole life.
Okay.
So we had kind of started thinking about it last January, I'd say, when we were traveling. We started considering moving out of Ottawa because it's always been home for both of us. And then I was like, well, if we're going to maybe move next year, I just want to skip the whole winter. So let's move in September. And then we landed on Toronto. Things started moving quickly. But there was actually another real estate team in Ottawa that we've always really gotten along with. We've talked so many times about different ways to collaborate. We joke like if we weren't in real estate, they would be our realtors. And the owners actually feel like, I would say me and my partner, but a few years ahead of us. So it was just kind of a really magical pairing. And we didn't want our team to feel more with us in another city. So it was kind of this perfect match where we combined forces and we made a larger real estate team in Ottawa. And I think a lot of that comes with like when you are focused on alignment and planning for the future, it's like those things just fall into your lap, where we just essentially pitched them the partnership and they were like, absolutely. We got together, we did a team photo shoot and called it a day.
That seems like it was perfectly designed for you to do what you wanted to do while still presenting the opportunity at the right time. Like, I mean, it was timing as well, right?
Yes.
For that to
Absolutely.
happen. Okay. And so Toronto now, what's the vibe? What's the energy for Toronto? I know you said you're in your build era, but I see, I'm going to rewind back a little bit. So looking at you from the outside, I see someone that's created a business. I see someone that is incredibly talented when it comes to content and social media. And then I know you've had this journey from like going from $22 building a business to a thriving like $1 million portfolio by the time you turn 29. And I also know you have your account on Instagram that I saw, In-Betweeners, which is personal finance and investing for creatives. So I want you to lead. I want to know which path you want to start with, to tell our audience a little bit about what it is that you specialize and do right now.
Yeah. So for me, I definitely have a few things going. I love teaching about business. So I work with business owners one-on-one. I do live workshops. I have courses and programs. Kind of my two categories there are helping businesses with their social media strategies, because I think so many business owners are so good at their business, but then feel like they're supposed to know how to do the business side and the marketing. Whereas for me, marketing has always been the thing I love, right? So like you said, with the content, like it is such second nature to me. So helping business owners bring that out. And then also building sustainably, because I burnt out really hard, really early with my first business. It's really important to me to help people just think through their decisions further with their businesses to see how can they build more sustainably. So it's kind of like the business side of things that I love to do. But overall, for us, it's always been about how do we grow our wealth without sacrificing our health or happiness? How do we create this kind of different life that we've wanted to chase? And so for us, that's where the in-betweeners comes in, of really sharing our own journey of how we look at personal finance, how we look at money as a tool and use that, as well as like different habits. And we're really big into wellness as well.
Yeah, I can tell.
Sure you know, because it all comes together, right? And so that's really what we want to do with the in-betweeners. And that's what I try to share online, is how those things can be more cohesive.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really about, I think a great starting point would be about how we build around our life. Whether you're entrepreneurial or not, it's thinking about what those goals are, and then how do we make it all fit together? Because it really is kind of like a puzzle.
Yeah. So walk me through like a framework if someone is currently starting a business or has a business, and applying your ethos to what you're talking about. Because when I look at this, I mean, it sounds great. Like, oh my God, I wish I can build a business that is, aligned and I get to think and focus. But most of the time I'm in survival mode, or most business owners are just like putting in all that hardcore work. Is that possible? Like, I actually wanted to ask you, I'm like, Mallory, is it possible to build a business without burnout? Because I'm in real estate and I'm constantly on. So how is that framework kind of, spread out when it comes to looking at your business?
Totally. So one thing I love to do, I call it the toddler test. How like toddlers ask why all the time, like, why is the sky blue? Why this? Is if you can take either the thing you're building or the goal that you have and really break down and do the toddler thing to yourself, right? Of asking why, and what do I really mean by that? So an example being, people will say, well, I want to be financially free. It's like, okay, well, why? What do you really mean by that? Because I think what happens is we see people that we look up to following a certain path, maybe someone like myself building different businesses, right? And then we think, well, I should do that because I also want to be financially free, and I know that's what that person is trying to do. But actually breaking down and asking, like, well, what do I really mean by that? Because you and I could sit here and both want to be financially free and have totally different definitions of that. But I could just start doing whatever you're doing because it seems to be going well. And then all of a sudden I've built something I don't want.
Sorry, I was going to interrupt. I was going to say, don't you find that when you ask people what they want, they all say, I want to be financially free, but then no one has a response to what that looks like?
100%.
So what does that, when you break it down, what have you seen that looks like? Because I'm sitting here, and if you were to ask me that question, I just respond with, yeah, Mallory, I want to be financially free. And if you dig deeper, it's kind of like, well, I want more time, or I want this. But do you find from your experience that two business owners saying the same thing, what is that difference when you get into it? What are those differences?
Yeah, well, even in your example of saying more time, right? More time is still so relative to our own experience. So if you said, I want more time, I could be like, oh, here's the business you should build. But maybe I didn't take the time to really understand what you mean by more time, right? So first, I always say, like, one person financially free could mean that they're making $100K but maybe it's passive, right? They feel like they don't have to work. Maybe they're work optional. That $100K is maybe coming from stocks. Or maybe somebody else, I've had clients that want to make $75K in their business. It's the right workload for them, but they feel they're not stressed about money. So they feel free to make decisions not purely based on money. It doesn't mean they're going and buying a Lamborghini on a Tuesday, but that's not what they're going for. They just want to know that they can go to the grocery store, not be checking prices too much, things like that. They don't want to feel restricted by finances in their typical day-to-day. Whereas someone else might feel like they need to have $2 million in the bank and still not feel financially free. So I think for yourself, just going through that exercise of constantly asking yourself, like, what do I really mean by that? Even if I say more time, is it picking up my kids after school? That's a big one for a lot of people, right? Is it that you're able to be off your phone? Or is it that you're taking like a 6-month travel across Asia, because that's a very different type of time freedom than someone who's maybe looking for that day-to-day type time freedom, right? Where I can start my day at 11 and end it at 2, right? That's different time freedom than I can walk away for 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. So what questions should we be asking ourselves when you start doing these with entrepreneurs and you're getting into business and scaling?
Yeah.
What are some questions we should be asking ourselves to determine what type of business we are building?
Yeah. So I would say do that until you get to the root where you're like, okay, I think I actually genuinely understand what I want. And then when you do that, one of 3 things will happen. Either you'll realize oh, I actually don't necessarily vibe with that underlying roots. It's maybe something that, you know, I saw a successful person say this was important, so I just took it on, which is very common too, right? Like when we're starting, we're going to follow those role models.
It's kind of easy to get lost in the hype too. Like, do you find that a lot? Like everyone on social media is like a founder of something, scaling to something. I mean, how much truth is there with you working with business owners? Because I had a friend and I was talking, and she also helps women-led businesses scale. And she's like, sometimes they are six-figure businesses, but they're not making that in actual profit. They're making that in revenue. So how, like, what is the course of action if you are running a successful business, how to determine those sort of like values when it comes to scaling or to stay where you're at, you know, what not to get lost in the noise? What would be your like advice or tips?
Yeah, it's looking at like what's driving you, what's what I would call your risk personality, instead of everyone always says like risk tolerance, but I think tolerance is almost more implying like, do you have savings or where are you currently situated? Whereas I think risk personality, I like to take low risk. I know maybe other people don't think it looks like that in some things. For me,
I would have never thought that.
I know. I'm learning that's a relative statement in my head.
But it's really not.
Yeah. It's like, to me, I'm taking low risks.
Okay. Would you say calculated risk?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think I guess that's a good way to put it.
In somewhat way.
Yes. So I think, looking at your risk personality as an example, like I always joke that my partner could have $3 in the bank account and he would like quit his job and go build a new thing, whereas I maybe need like 30,000 in savings to do that same move, right? So that's where it's risk personality. So really, honestly, I always say like business, especially as a bait and switch of like getting to know yourself. Like you're going to think you're starting a business. It's just a giant personal development trap. But it's a good thing because then you can figure out, okay, well, what do I actually mean by that thing that's important to me? What is my risk personality? And then what do I actually want my day-to-day to look like, whether that's right now or later? And I think that's where we help avoid that scale trap of people are often also subconsciously chasing like the image of success, right? And it's not necessarily because we want to brag about it. It's because that's what we've seen success to look like, right? So success often looks like office space. It looks like a big team, right? So then when we think of those things, we go, well, if I want to succeed in business, I need a big team. And that's where we can end up in those situations you were talking about, where maybe you've, 3x'd your revenue in your business, but you haven't even doubled your profit. And it depends. Are you in that for a 10-year game where you know that and you're hoping that eventually you're building this thing to sell? Or are you someone where you're like, I would like to have a very profitable business now. I would like to keep it super lean. That's something I think about when I say low risk is I like to run my businesses lean. Like I have a part-time virtual assistant and that's the only team that I work with because it allows me to, put in more when I want to put in more and then focus on keeping that profit so it can be more of like an investment funnel. So really thinking about how you want your business to fit into the bigger picture.
That's a hard journey to navigate because you're so caught up doing the day-to-day work. I want the audience to know a little bit more about what you've been able to build because I think watching again from, objectively speaking, super successful. And one of the questions that I really wanted to focus on asking during the podcast is, you're obviously here because you're successful, you're confident, you're great. And, I want other women to be inspired, but I also want other women to feel like they're not alone and that we also do struggle with things like, feeling like a failure sometimes and things that we're still working on. So I want you to walk through your success story and then I want you to give the back end of what that success looked like in real time.
Oh my gosh. I mean, even when you're like, you're obviously super successful, I'm like, am I?
See, we all have it.
I'm like, oh, don't say that. Like, I don't know if that's a true statement.
Why do you do that?
I know. I think there's good in it. That, but it's obviously not all good. I think especially as women, we do it a lot. I think there's kind of been a quote circulating as well of people saying like, if I did something that I like set my mind to and thought I would do, I don't celebrate that accomplishment because I think I was just supposed to do it. Whereas if there's something that I screw up, like I put all that blame on me, but we don't put all the credit on ourselves for the wins. So 100%
So I'm curious, like, do you still question am I successful or not? Or do you feel like you're still trying to define what that success looks like for you?
I think it's about defining it in different ways. And it's like, it's not really, I feel like it gets looked at as like a yes, no, check one of the boxes, right? And so I think it's like when you look at certain things you've done on paper, like you mentioned $1 million net worth at
girl, give me it all. I want to know, how'd you go from $22 to $1 million?
But see, that's an example where like that's something that I need to sometimes actually lean on for myself and be like, okay, yeah, that actually is something I did and that's pretty impressive. Because you're always going to have those times where you're building the next thing or you're meeting really interesting people and you're like, wow, like look what they did. Yeah. And then you're like, I don't know if I should be in this room, or like, I don't know if I'm ever going to build something that they've built, when really your version could just be super different. And I think too, when we were talking about that scale trap, I think that's a big part of it, is we can meet these people who have a team of 500 or whatever it might be, and you might be a 1 or 2 person team and immediately feel small because of it. But you could be building something that's actually really sustaining your life. Maybe it's contributing to other investments. I'm a very multi-passionate person, so I think about that too, that I know I don't want to create like a beast of a business that I might be bored of later and then feel trapped.
But you also understood that earlier on after building a very successful business. Would you say so? Like, walk us through a little bit of your background. I'd love to know.
So if we go like back, like even as early as high school, I like planned my prom. I did fundraising. Like I always kind of loved those things, you know? I remember like counting the money for prom tickets like on my living room floor. And
you were that girl.
This is so exciting. I wasn't getting all the money, but I was just like doing the math of it and like thinking of different fundraisers. Like that always really excited me. So then when I went to university, I took journalism, but I also started working in marketing pretty much right away, like in a corporate setting. And so that really validated my love for marketing. So I took a minor in business in school, and then I was just like diving headfirst into experience. So I kept working. I figured like if I'm going to work anyways, if it's going to be part-time at a mall or part-time in an office, like I'm going to get in that office and start learning. So that was a big part of it for me. And then I transitioned into startups and then actually started our first business out of one of my classes in university. They were really encouraging of entrepreneurship, which to this day I still am very grateful for. They're like, hey, build something you actually are building or want to build. So our first business was a powerlifting apparel company. And that definitely was one where we didn't have all the insights that I have now. We just 2 kids who loved powerlifting, loved
it's
bringing
so beautiful sometimes
together.
Just like that, right? Where there's no other information other than just what you're doing and learning.
Yeah. And actually, not to get too ahead, but that's something I was talking about recently of like back then, it felt so easy because it was like my only job was to run with that business. You weren't we had nothing invested. We had no anything, you know? So you had a very clear focus. But then later, when there are other opportunities, it sometimes can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking of all of these different factors, right? But so back then we were just 2 kids, loved powerlifting, loved building community, loved marketing, which obviously an apparel company, there's so much of that to play with. But we really just hit a wall where I got extremely burnt out. Like I had to stop competing in the sport, which was hard because it was kind of my safe space and my outlet. And then it was, I'd say like the stop that really had us reflect on the business and say like, okay, do we want to sell t-shirts forever? Have we ever thought about what this looks like? What are we building this to do? Like we were not people who were like, I'm building a business to sell in 5 to 10 years. We had none of that insight. We just started making t-shirts and selling them. Yeah.
And it was 100%. Doing something great.
Yes. Yeah. It was like one foot in front of the next. How do you learn a few new lessons for the next collection you're dropping? How do you find a few new apps for the website?
Right? I also didn't know powerlifting was a huge community. First of all, what is powerlifting exactly?
Yeah, so it's weightlifting competition, but it's squat, bench press, and deadlift.
Oh, damn, all the things I don't like. I will not be a part of that community. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, totally fair. I mean, people always they picture Olympic weightlifting a lot, and I'm like, no, I did not throw weights over my head. That would also scare me.
I did CrossFit for a while, and that was like, I didn't even know what it was when I joined, but I was like, am I going to look like a heavyweight champ like after this? But it was insane. It tested my mindset, my physical endurance, everything. And it was like the best thing I ever did. But now that I'm like almost 40, I'm like, I can't do these high impact workouts. But it did, like, I ended up in the hospital once because of CrossFit. I got something because it was so intense that I ended up being hospitalized for 3 days. And that's when I started looking at, like, sometimes these physical big punch kind of workouts can actually harm you and not be good for your own body, right? That's a whole different conversation. But I'm assuming with that and then burnout, did you find that it was because of both business and actually physical?
Yes. So there was like overlap for a period there where I was still in school. I was working at a startup. We were building our business and we were competing nationally.
Oh my God.
In powerlifting. It's like, I look back and I'm like, how did I not like burn out sooner? Like the fact that I did it for more than 5 minutes was crazy, but
that's the power of being young.
Yeah.
I always say that
youth.
the naiveness you have when you're young and the energy that you have of just doing something, it's, you know, it catches up later.
Yeah, it caught up quickly for sure. But yeah, it was just crazy exciting times. We were so focused on building, but then once I did burn out, it brought all those questions, right? Of, okay, is this a forever thing? And are we building? Do we like this? Also, it was starting to feel more and more like a little bit contributing to consumerism because people wanted more things and faster. Like we were launching new collections faster. We were adding more items to the collection. And then that burnout really made us go like, okay, where are we taking this? What feels good? And looking at like, is there actually a way, because we were learning so much in that business, even from the financial, I feel like we were making more and more money. And then all of a sudden we had budget, which we weren't used to having, right? We were building everything on no budget. So then it's that interesting point where maybe you're putting more money into event sponsorships than you ever would have before because you can, but now it's a little bit more high stress. Now we're both working full time for the company. We need it to make more money versus before it was kind of just like a passion, side hustle, any dollar you made, you were like, this is incredible. Versus now we were doing this creative venture and a lot was depending on it, right? So it really gave us that time to reflect. And that is why I learned so many lessons early of just really thinking through like, where do you want to take this? What's important to you? All of those kind of questions.
And was it soon enough after that you pivoted into more of what you do now? Or did it take you a long time to figure out what your next kind of venture was going to be?
Yeah, so I gave myself breathing room. So my partner had honestly read a personal finance book. It got him hyped on real estate. And he was like, I'm going to get my license because we wanted to get into real estate. And for him, that was like, why not get right into it? If we don't have money right now to buy something, like that's the best way to learn about it. So to be honest, at the time, I almost felt like left behind in looking for an identity because we had been building this thing. And then we were talking about what's next. And, you know, he kind of found that thing right away. And I was like, I don't know what my next is. You know, I was doing some corporate consulting. I was working with some businesses on their social, but I really, because I needed to work on my health too, I gave myself that time to just, you know, these few clients are paying my bills. Let me figure out truly what I want to do next. So that was really nice because it wasn't like an easy jump. And like the very unsexy story of that is we had kind of run our bank account back down to almost zero for the first time of like, there was so much up and down. We were taking those bigger risks. And it got to a point where we were like, oh, wow, I feel so exhausted by this business. And somehow we almost feel like we ended up back in the same spot. And then we found out
Welcome to entrepreneurship.
Welcome to entrepreneurship. Yeah. And then we, you know, talked to, and at that point too, especially being young, or if you don't have a lot of business people in your circle, like we had very few people to go to to say like, our business has $0. What should we do? Like your parents would freak out if that's your way you're supporting yourself. So we had like one mentor we sat down with to talk it out. He was really great. But we still went back and forth on like, what was the vision for the company? Did we want to keep pouring into it? And then honestly, we had a really big tax return because we had spent so much money that we found out we were getting a big tax return. And we were like, is this kind of the gift of like, can we start the next thing from this? If both of our hearts aren't in this the same way that it was, and we didn't ever have that plan of like, what is the evolution? So we honestly took that tax repayment, like I said, a very unsexy story, but I feel like that's often the choices you do make. It's like, hey, this actually feels a little bit like a lifeline of like, could we either take this to rebuild or could we take this to start the next thing? And
tell me what you did with that tax dollar money, girl.
We bought a house.
I love it. You know, funny, I have a very similar story too. Oh, yeah? Like, I mean, COVID, you know, surviving off of CERB, financials went down, rebuilding again. And it's an unsexy story, but also a story that must be shared, especially in our space, right? Because our claim to fame is usually these big sentences. Like for me, it's like I went from like 0 properties to 6 properties in 18 months, but like all the rest of the stuff in between between using our lines of credit and then, having to pay mortgage on 3 properties, stuff like that no one shares about. So it's great that you're sharing that. And what did that lead to? What did you do with that money?
We ended up using that to buy our first home. Like we just put it to the side for a down payment, which was great because, like I said, we knew we wanted to get into real estate. So that ended up working out for later. And then we just stayed really lean. Like my partner was getting his real estate license. I had those few social media clients. I kind of went through that phase of being like, this isn't the thing I want to do. I'm not looking to turn it into a business, but it's a skill set I have. And I had the opportunity of a few people locally who were like, hey, can you help with this? So I really lean on that. I think we always think we have to have that next thing or be like, yeah, I'm building an agency, but it's also okay to just say, hey, I'm going to use a skill set I have, make sure my bills are covered, and give myself that space. So were you
consulting people to build social?
I was actually doing social media management for 2 companies.
Very nice.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So
that's why you're so great at content.
Well, because that's how we grew our first business, actually. Okay. Yeah. So it was something that was so natural. So then we would often have people ask, hey, how do you guys do this? Or would you be interested in doing it for us? And normally for me, it's like such a no because I know the work that goes into it. But at the time, it was also just great friends that I loved their businesses and wanted to help. And it was just kind of, again, that perfect match of I can do this. I don't have to focus on like sales or building. I can just take that time to think.
And what was that? What was it called? Was it a program or was it just
Didn't even have a name.
Oh,
that's what I'm saying. Bare bones. Just like they needed social media management. I'm like, cool, I'll make your content for you.
You do that so well. I wanted to gear more towards money and personal finance because you guys have now, is the YouTube channel now live or is it something that you guys are building?
Both. So it's live because we previously have videos on it and we're just relaunching now.
Okay. So talk to me about the in-betweeners. What is it? What is it about? What can someone hope to learn from that channel?
Yeah. So, I mean, as you were saying, like the unsexy conversations, that's where I like to live a little bit more. And we always say like, we're not extreme in any directions. That's how we always end up as the in-betweeners because, we have friends in real estate that have 100 doors. We have, 2 long-term tenants and a cottage. Even with business, I have friends that have scaled 7-8 figures. I like to stay in like a slightly smaller space. So everything we look at, even with health, right? People get so extreme in health trends. We like to kind of be in that middle ground of like,
I love the name.
Thank you.
I feel like it's so relatable because you're not just always going to know everything and become an expert. But most of the time, I feel like I'm an in-betweener. I really do.
And maybe it's not such a bad thing,
It's not.
Like, I think we're always chasing for that end of being the top of everything. And what we've realized is like we can have so much more fun when we do live in that in-between and get comfortable in that in-between and not be defined by any of the things. Because I think identity with business and wealth building, personal finance, whatever you want to call it, it's so oddly like intricate. I'm like, what word?
It's so
all connected, right? Yeah. So it's like if you can separate your identity from those things, that's where I think you can really make the choice of like, do I actually want 100 doors, or is that what I think a successful real estate investor has, right? Like actually for our own real estate property. So we bought a house in like the suburbs that we were living in. And then we decided to move more into the city. So we rented out that first house. And when we were looking to make that second move, we were debating moving into the city or buying a rental. And so we were kind of exploring what a lot of people do. They maybe buy like a multi-unit thing that could be renovated, that has maybe like even lower paying tenants, right? Renovate the place, you have more opportunity. And just so much of that wasn't sitting well with us for like a lot of reasons. It was intimidating to us to have that many tenants. I don't love the idea of like renovating and trying to kick out people who are paying a certain rent, like all of that. It just didn't quite fit for us. So for us, we were like, we'd rather purchase a property that we want to live in and move into. So for us, both of our long-term tenants live in houses that we've lived in and would live in again, right? Whereas a lot of real estate investors kind of try to find these like falling apart things. So I think for us, that's always been a driving factor is like that lifestyle move of being in that in between, being like, it's actually okay to only own properties that you would live in yourself. You don't have to be going and getting these like 20 unit things or these ones that require
so
big
easy to
renos.
get lost in that space, right?
Totally.
I mean, I think for us it was the same thing. It was like one after the other, and it was like this addiction, not realizing what the cost was and whatnot. But
Right.
it seems like to me that you and your partner have different kinds of investments. So you've done business and you've grown well through that, and then you've done real estate investing. If we were to just go back to the basics and what you talk about in betweeners, tell me about what it is that you are teaching or hoping to deliver across anyone listening that's here. What can they hope to get from that type of content?
Yeah, I think for us, personal finance has been the foundation to everything. The more we learn about personal finance, the better we are as business owners, the more we can make like interesting choices in our personal lives. So I think personal finance is always that foundation. And I think there's also this space where people will find success in life or in business and be more embarrassed about not knowing the foundations, like not feeling like they understand investing or not really knowing what kind of accounts to have set up. So for us, it's about filling that gap of having the bigger picture conversations about money, of how are people making money, but also then going on the tangible of like, here is how to set up your Wealth Simple if you are getting started. And for us, we really relate to those creatives or people who are trying to live differently. I think so much of the personal finance advice is structured around a 9 to 5, around
I agree.
contributions, right? Things like that.
Or like you make this much, so you can save this much, but what about an entrepreneur or
what if you don't know what you're making that month? And like, I think having more conversations around that. So a quick example for you, like we were talking about, maybe people would invest a certain amount monthly. I invest a lot lower monthly, and then I will often do a big lump sum at the end of the year once I know how my year has panned out and I can have that extra contribution. And, you know, you hear things like dollar cost averaging, right, of people wanting to invest through the year. But ultimately, that's not going to be the ideal for everybody. If I try to invest more through the year, it might make me feel more in survival mode. I might feel more leaner than I want to, versus if at the end of the year I can go, you know what, I can put that extra amount in and feel really good about it, then that works. But there's not a lot of conversations around how to do these things when you're not sure where, or if not necessarily just not sure of what money's coming in, but if it just vary a lot, right? A lot of people could have a 50K month in a business and then a 5K month.
Yeah, I was going to say that is also such an intimidating space. However, now women like you, Tori Dunlop, there's so many great personal finance experts coming out that are sharing their knowledge and expertise on what the money mindset is. So I'm curious to know, going back to investing and what you teach, what are some basic principles that people, or women, particularly in our show, we have a lot of, you know, our audience are all women. How can women start to even think about investing or create a money mindset that you think is like the foundation of even starting to like equip yourself with all of this knowledge about money and investing and finance? Where does someone start?
Yes, I think firstly, like just keep learning about it. Like even if you just pick up one finance book or listen to one podcast episode, that's you taking a first step, because often we get so overwhelmed and it's almost like, if I don't know how to create a 100K investment portfolio, I'm just not even going to start. But if you can just say, hey, okay, today I'm going to open a Wealthsimple account, or I'm going to open, you know, this investment thing, or I'm going to listen to that one podcast episode I heard about money, that really is step one. So not being afraid to keep learning. Like I learn things all the time where I go, oh, okay, so the last few years I've been doing this thing not as optimized as I could have, right? I think that's the thing. People think even people who are sharing about this have so much expertise, but I'm still learning so much, whether that's the things for the next step or just things I could have been doing differently, right? So not being afraid to keep learning. I definitely think earning more is always going to be a really powerful tool, right? You can always make more from investing than you can for saving. And the way to invest more is to have more cash flow, whether that's starting a side hustle, whether that's like negotiating for a raise if you are somebody who's employed, or just really focusing on your business and how your business can support those investments. So definitely earning more and having regular check-ins with your money. So again, even if you're just getting started, if you start like every Friday, you're opening your bank account, you're looking at what those expenses are so that you do feel more familiar, that's how you're able to then say, okay, I actually could turn on an auto investment for $100 a month. I could set that aside and feel okay with it, right?
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of personal finance information out there that's, from the States. And I love the fact that you're a Canadian finance expert. You talk about that. Let's say I've done step 1, step 2, step 3, and I'm just starting out and I'm ready. What Canadian personal finance advice would you tell me to step into? Would it be looking at real estate first? Would it be looking at investing into stocks first? Where would it be maybe having a savings account and saving up for that emergency fund? What are some things that women can start off with?
Yeah, I would say opening a high interest savings account. So that's an account where your money will never dip below, right? Whereas with investing, we talk about there could be that up and down. With a high interest savings account, let's say I put even $200 in it, it will never dip under 200. It's safe there. It's just a savings account, but it's earning more than a typical savings account. So each month you're going to get a little bit of money on that. And let's say, you get some interest earned, it's 220. Then the next time you earn interest, it's off that 220 instead of just the 200, right? That's how the compounding side works. So setting up a high interest savings account, that's where something like your emergency fund could go. Or I call like that in between cash. Like let's say you are getting married very soon, or you have a vacation coming up, you have a major expense you're saving for, you don't necessarily want to invest it because maybe we need it later this year. That's where that money should kind of live, because especially if you have a good chunk of cash, it will earn interest quickly. So setting up that high interest account, having an emergency fund, I do say when we talk about that risk personality, figure out your risk personality and your existing context, right? So a lot of people say 3 to 6 months or 6 to 9 months of your salary. I think it really depends. Like, do you have a partner? Does your partner have a stable
position? Not like the same formula plug and play for everyone.
Exactly. Because for some people, actually having like 9 months of expenses might end up being silly because they could have invested some of that and maybe they had very stable other factors, right? If you have a business that's super consistent, let's say you have clients on retainer for a year plus, right? Everyone has different situations. So look at your risk personality and just figure out like, okay, what do I feel good about having, like if everything else drops? So you've got that high interest savings account, you're going to build that emergency fund and put it in it.
So is this like a step-by-step? Would you say those are the things to do first?
I would say start with those. Okay. If we're talking like actual, like let's do a tangible thing, that's what I would do first. Obviously you can do things like take a look at your expenses and edit those. But like I said, I'm always focused on like how can we make more, because those changes are only going to be so big. And I think sometimes we also intimidate ourselves of like, oh, well, first I have to check all my subscriptions and figure out how I'm spending in each category. You don't have to do all that.
Yeah, because I feel like that's what people tell you to do first. Yes. Like pull out the calculator, pull out the monthly expense sheet, and it's so overwhelming. Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, I don't even want to look at it because that's usually, kind of.
I'd rather like if you have 20K sitting in an account, we're just going to move it to a high interest savings account.
Okay, that seems very doable and almost not as scary.
Not so bad, right?
Yeah,
that's the thing. Okay. It's like we feel like we all of a sudden have to be like a teacher and we're going to go grade our credit card statements. Like the first thing you can do is just open up that account, even just look around in it and get comfortable, right? I use EQ Bank for that as an example, but you can nickname the accounts. You can even set savings goals. So there's like tracker bars. Like you can definitely get comfortable with it and have fun. But I would say if you have a chunk of savings somewhere, move it into a high interest savings account. And if you don't have that chunk of savings, build it. And then from there, setting up, when you talk about like what kind of investing, that's also going to be comfort zone, right? Like if you're married to a realtor and there's a real estate opportunity, like maybe it is real estate for you, right? Yeah. But for a lot of people, it is going to just be like investing in the stock market, starting to get comfy with that. So as Canadians, that's going to be like your TFSA or your RSP. And people often get, again, stuck on like, I don't know which one, so then I don't invest. When really there's not going to be a wrong, right? That's the biggest thing I've learned about money too. Like I said, I'm still learning, and then I'll learn, oh, I could have been doing this other thing better. But it's not straight to jail, right? Like I always say, you're further from jail than you think.
Yeah, of course. I was also going to ask you, I mean, what have you learned about money in the last little while that you just wish you knew sooner, or was like a big aha moment?
Honestly, for me, it's actually been watching compounding interest work in the stock market. So it's like people talk about that, right? If you invest this much now, you could have $1 million later. And I always understood that concept. And I was good at setting aside the investment money and not thinking about it. But obviously the last few years have been strong with the stock market. So actually seeing the effect of like, oh, wow, now I can actually see, like, I only invested this portion of what my investment portfolio is. Like, the rest has just been growth. Again,
That's
it's like
exciting.
such a simple concept, but I feel like I was just always like, yeah, that's something for like 60-year-old Mal, whatever. And then now you see the money and you go, oh, that's a lot more money. And I didn't put more money in.
And I think women also are like, I just have $2,000, but you don't realize that $2,000 is better than nothing.
Massive.
So is there a specific starting off amount that you would say you've seen that works or you would recommend to start with?
Yeah, I would say like I like a combo of a little like starting lump sum that you're comfortable with. Let's say you're somebody who likes to hoard your savings. Maybe you've got like 30K in savings. You could go, do I feel comfy like dropping 10K into investments? Or am I more comfy like just with a 5? Or maybe you're like, actually, like for myself, I think when I started investing, I had like 30K in savings that had just been in a savings account for so long. And I always needed it in case I needed it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, girl, like you haven't needed it, right? So then I finally was like, okay, I can put that in my investments. And obviously too, like, it's getting more into it, but you can pull from your investments. Like it's good to have conversations with whether it's like an advisor or whoever you're comfortable with. But it's not like it's actually gone forever, right? We're not like shipping it off to 60-year-old me.
I also think that the whole like finance space is like, you think of old white men talking about finances and it's changed so drastically, but we're still kind of like figuring out who to go to because you need to see that person and feel relatable to them, especially now. I mean, I know we talked about women taking a bigger chunk in the finance space. They're making more, but then we also have women that are struggling to pay bills and struggling to make more money. So I really like how you said before you start anything, before you can even invest, it's figuring out like, do I make enough? And if I don't, let's focus first on making more money before even thinking about investing. Would you say that that is a good perspective to have, or would you say invest regardless? Because I've heard both, right?
Yeah.
It's like you'll never have enough, so start now versus maybe making more money and then starting. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the get started because of compounding interest and habits, right? That's the other thing where like habits is such a key part of money conversations. If you can build that habit of investing, of checking the investment account and not just your checkings account, right? Like it starts to build it into your everyday life. And then you are an investor at that point. And then you can learn almost, I think of it like a video game of like every time I learn, I'm almost like going to the next level.
Visually, I like
exactly,
that.
right? And it's like you hit the like little Super Mario coin.
I imagine a sound too.
Right, exactly. So you're like, if I'm already set up investing, then I can kind of go to that next level and unlock whatever that is. Whereas if we just never take that first step, then maybe 3 years from now, we're still only unlocking that first level. And you could have been like 12 plus levels.
Yeah,
in,
absolutely.
Right?
I mean, I feel like I can talk about money and finance with you forever. There's so much more that I want to talk about. But I think one thing that I would love to know is some money mindsets that people can rewire, because I think that is like the starting point, even for myself. I feel like if I wasn't in the right environment or around people that were talking about these conversations around investing and money, I probably would have never honestly made my first move, just because I wasn't privy to that information. But also it taught me to look at my mindset and like what my parents thought and how did I spend my money and how did they spend their money. So like, what are some money mindsets that people can unlock within themselves, and where should they start with?
I love what you said about the people, because that is a big part of it too, is like if nobody in your circle is having conversations around money, or if it's only ever negative conversations, or like
so true. Oh my God.
Yeah. Like I hate to say victim mentality, because I also think there's a lot of people who are like victims to systems. So I'm not talking about that. But I think, you know, everybody's had that friend that everything happens to them, right? In their mind, it's like everything is a crisis and it's always the negative side of things. For me, it's always been about that creative problem solving. So looking at, you know, people might think, oh, well, I only make this much in my job, so I will never get to have that kind of investment. Instead, say, well, I like my job, so how do I keep this job but still figure out my way to get there, right? How can I find other women that are maybe doing that, right? Or looking at, well, maybe the job's not going to cut it if I know where I want to go and I'm not seeing that math add up, right? But really looking for those examples. If you don't have the friend circles, it's social media, right? It's podcasts like these, right? Of now, you are people's source for finding these things for them to find other resources. It's such a like a cascading effect of they will, you know, find this podcast. Maybe they even found this podcast from a friend or another creator who shared it, and then they're going to find me through it. And then, you know what I mean? Like your resources start building tenfold once you start having the conversations and seek out places where the conversations are happening.
I mean, now the algorithm is so wired for us so that even if you think about it, it will pop up on your feed.
It's like, oh, you like that? Here's everything you've ever learned about it.
We are literally in an era where if things are being fed to us, if you just open up your mindset or the conversation or even search, right? So it will, I mean, you and I, same thing. I think I was like on Tori Dunlop's and then you popped up. And then even now us meeting next week, we're in the same circle. So I just find that social media is such a powerful tool if used correctly. But yeah, I think with mindset, there's a big shift that needs to happen. And I think that if we are able to surround ourselves with the similar conversations, that's like an explosive growth that a lot of people can tap into, but they just don't know how, which is why I think that podcast and content, similar focused content, is like one of the fastest way to really unlock that type of growth and mindset.
Totally. And I think not being afraid to experiment. Like I talk about this a lot. I started treating life and business and everything more like an experiment, and it takes us from this shame-based place to more like curiosity-induced. Like think of all the things we do out of shame, right? Like I should do this. I should go to the gym more. I should eat less treats.
That's why I loved your post on your bad habits that were good. We need to get into that because I was flipping through that yesterday, and one of the things was morning routine because I was like, I'm obsessed with morning routine, so I want to have this conversation with you, and then it falls off, and then you go back on, and then there's pressure, and then there's guilt. So like so many things all going on at once.
Yeah, and it's like so many of these things we're doing for like better mental health, and then we're beating ourselves up for not doing them.
It's
and that's like somehow lost on us.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. So like talk to me about your wellness and habits. I think I saw a post where you shared, and going back to the money conversation. So out of the investing conversation, let's talk about purchases and investments that you can make in yourself. So I think you talked about purchases you made in the last year that you really loved, and I'd like a list of that. So more into the fun. So what are some things that you've invested in last year? What are some things that you are interested in investing in this year? From both like a materialistic standpoint or also like just completely for your business and yourself.
Yeah. I love things that make my life just flow better. So like I love home organization. Like if everything has a spot, then it means that I feel like my brain already has so much going on as an entrepreneur. Like you're always constantly just like creative problem solving, right? Like you're doing that all the time that you're like, I don't want to have to also problem solve where I put that shirt that I want to wear today, right? So if everything has a spot, so I love home organization stuff, like anything like drawer organizers, those kind of things. That's very much my jam. I have like a pair of headphones that I share all the time because they're like a great sensory experience. They feel good on your ears. They let me just like
Which
zone
ones are
in.
they?
Oh gosh, I'll have to like link it for you. I'm like, I don't even know what they're called, but they're like actually only like $120 and they're often on sale for like $75. And considering so many of these options now, right, they're like $500, $700. I didn't even know if I would like over-ear headphones. So I'm like, I don't want to spend $700 to find out
ridiculous.
that I don't like them. And I actually ran into someone in the elevator that had the Apple Air Max ones. And I asked how they like them because I've heard they like fall off at the gym. And they were like, we love them, but they stink. Because they said you can't like change them or like clean them very well. Yeah. So they're like, our headphones stink. I'm like, oh, that's really
After
gross.
spending $700, I'm sure you don't want your...
Yeah, you have stinky headphones right on your face. I was like, okay, well, I love the honesty because now I don't want them at all. Yeah. For me, travel has been a big one. So I didn't travel. Like I grew up in dance. So like we got to travel for that, which was cool, but it would be like going to like Brantford or like Guelph and you're like staying at like a random Delta hotel. That was like my travel growing up, which I'm so fortunate to have been able to be in dance, but like I was not going anywhere overseas. So for us, we've been traveling more the last few years, and it's been such a good reminder to me to like get out and live because I love the finance side and the business side. I noticed like not spending money on that growing up as a family made me so hesitant to spend on experiences. And, you know, there wasn't necessarily language about it, but also I grew up with two other sisters. So, you know, my parents were like, a family of five, like we're not going to Jamaica to an all-inclusive. Like, do you know how expensive it is to fly anywhere for 5 people? Like, obviously me and my sisters weren't paying, right? But that kind of is those background things. And actually you mentioned Tori, she's a friend of mine. We had a conversation about that because for her, travel is so easy to spend and she grew up traveling a bit more. So for her, it was like a natural
Same
flow.
with me, yeah.
Right, where Whereas for me, like booking, like you mentioned Portugal, like for me, I was like, oh my God, we're going to like pay for a flight to Portugal. We're going to have this many hotels. But then you go and you're like, okay, well, my whole world view has changed. Like I feel inspired again. So that's definitely a big investment that we've been making. And for me, it does feel like that of like, it feels scarier to me than like investing in real estate. Cause I'm like, I fear, I know it's crazy. I fear looking back at things and feeling like it was like a mistake. And my partner's been really good at helping me see them as like, no, you're just taking risks, right?
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, if all this falls apart and like, you know, we have no money left, so I'm going to be like, oh, we shouldn't have like taken those trips or gotten the slightly fancier hotel. But then I realized when I do get the slightly fancier hotel, it's like such an experience for me and I soak it in so much. I think about that hotel years later, you know?
So with that being said, do you have any travel plans coming up? Like, are you?
Great question. Well, we just got back from Tulum, which was a really cool one. We have a realtor friend who started trading in Tulum during the pandemic. And so we went and we toured properties. We made a bunch of content. It was really, really
incredible.
fun.
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah. So that's a good example too of like, for us, we're like, this is a really cool business opportunity. And also just, we would love to see expensive villas. Like we were touring villas for sale for like $5 million.
Oh my God.
So like just being in those spaces, right, is so magical in itself.
I was going to say the possibilities become so much more possible when you are physically surrounded by the type of business or opportunities you want.
Yes.
Because all of a sudden it feels real, right? So I always say that like if it's not in your circle, go out and seek so that you can be put in those situations where you can imagine yourself doing and being and doing those things. I mean, one of the reasons I started the podcast, it's always selfish, right? It's to meet cool women like you where you like, how can I learn more about what you're doing and how you're doing it, how you think and whatnot. And that leads me to some habits and routines that you think make you successful, however you want to define that. But like, what are some tools that you've noticed that you've kind of adapted in your life over the last little while that have really helped you prosper, grow, and become the person that you are now? Whether it be a morning, whether they're rituals or whether they're routines. But I love how authentic your again, authentic is one of those words that I think is overused. So, but I love how real your content is because you talk about the things that you do, but you're not just sticking on trend. You're really sharing like this worked, this didn't work. And that content from your side is the one that I find myself reading and interacting with the most. It's like 10 bad habits that were actually good and stuff like that. So what have you found that's worked for you?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point because I find, especially as someone who shares about these things, people will fill in the gaps as we naturally do with our brain, right? So they assume that like I am just living optimized 24/7. Yeah, every habit
keep
is
it
like
real
on cue.
For me, you're like the most optimized person I'm meeting today. So break it down.
Right, but I think that's the first part is also realizing like you're probably telling yourself that like everyone else has like morning routine. They haven't missed one like the last 365 days. So that's a big one for me. And as you were talking about that one post I did, it was like 10 bad habits, like quote unquote bad habits that have actually brought me success. And it was things like I don't have a 5-year plan. I remember when we were building our first business, every time we would go speak, especially at high schools or universities, they would ask like, what's the 5-year plan? And I just always wanted to be like, slow down. I'm like barely getting to tomorrow. I don't know. And like, it gives me anxiety when you ask, but I've realized like it's been what's allowed me to go with the flow and like say yes to these really cool opportunities because I wasn't so, you know, heading forward with my blinders on. I was actually able to see the opportunities around me and have some really cool things happen because I didn't have a 5-year plan, right?
Yeah, you need to let like natural courses happen. I actually realized that through traveling because I own a travel company called The Girls Trip. And I didn't realize, but for the last like 5 years, we've done so many trips with women and organized the itinerary from like A to Z in Portugal, in the Amalfi Coast, in Bali, in Morocco, that my life, my personal travel became that organized. And it wasn't until me and my husband went to Asia last year. We went off for like 3 weeks. We did Vietnam and Thailand, and every detail, Mallory, was planned to the T. Like when I got to this rock, go around the bend.
Oh my gosh.
And like it was crazy because I've been planning experiences for so long that when I did that and I was in there, it stripped away all the excitement, the fun, and I was like, oh my God, I cannot travel like this ever again.
No.
Because it's taking away from what's possible, what you just let things happen, right? And I think it's the same in business and life.
Yes. And like also knowing you can have categories of your life where maybe you are that person and then you're not, right? Like travel's a great example because
Very
part
true.
of us not traveling earlier on is neither of us are the people who want to like plan the trip. Like we're both a little overwhelmed by it. You know,
Come
so
to
many
me.
people.
Come
yeah,
to
I'm
me.
like, you
I
can
got
plan
you.
all of our trips. But that's the thing. It's something that so many people love to do. So it almost makes you go like, oh, how come I'm like not excited about planning this? But I realized, like you said, I'm actually doing that so much in my business that I don't want to log off and be like, let me plan my 6-day itinerary. So for us, when we travel, I'm like the night before, we're looking on the computer like, what are we doing tomorrow?
That's giving me anxiety, girl. Don't tell me this.
I would say it wasn't always the best way to do it. But in a way, it was nice because we were like, we have no commitments of like, we've signed up for this tour or we paid in advance and now we don't want to go. We were like, what kind of day are we feeling tomorrow? And so for us, it really worked, right? So I think you can kind of have these personalities show up differently, even in your own life, which I think is important. Because like I said, people, I think, just think I'm like a systematized machine with everything, and it's very much not true.
Okay, so let's talk about what you don't have together, what you're still working through, and what is something that you're still building and you're maybe a newbie at it, and what people don't see.
I think health is actually a big one for me, of like, even though I've been in that health and fitness space for so long, finding the right balance, and it changes as you age, right? So it's like the second you figure it out, you're like, I don't know if that's what my body wants anymore. But health is a big one for me, of like, you know, I did the 10K steps phase and then like I literally hurt my foot from it and couldn't walk because my foot was like so
It's
overwhelmed.
a lot of steps.
It's a lot of walking.
I thought it was just me. I'm like, how are people hitting these 10K? Because my
It's a
feet
lot.
would hurt so much after
Yeah.
10K.
Yeah. And then you're like, cool, now I can't get out of bed in the morning because I have so much foot pain. Like, then you're like, that's embarrassing, right? So many people right now are running. It's like I feel like running is not necessarily a perfect match for my body. So for me, it's been a lot of that of like, okay, I know that working out really hard required so much extra maintenance, like physio, massage, all those things. So I'm like, what's my level of fitness now? Same with nutrition. I can tell, you start to have kind of those earlier burnout signs so that you can avoid it in the future. For me, it's like, once I stop making like lunches and proper dinners, that's my signal like, okay, we got to get things back under wraps, because it's just like you're eating whatever, or you're like grabbing a bar for lunch. And that's when I can start to feel it. So for me, I'm still always trying to figure out like, what is my nutrition game that feels the best for my body? What is the level of fitness that feels the best for me? I am like, I will just cave and go downhill with food. Like neither of us are.
It's a constant roller coaster, and also
feels
you know
like
what?
so much work.
It does, and it's like a full-time job, but also it's something that changed my perspective very recently. Just happened on the weekend. My girlfriend moved to Morocco, and she moved there about a year and a half ago, and she came back, and so I was just like bombarding her with like all these questions.
Yeah.
And she's like, one thing I noticed that I didn't notice before is everyone is so obsessed with health and fitness. Like as soon as you talk to someone, how was your day? They're talking about, oh, I went to the gym today. I did this and I did that. And I was like, that's so true. She's like, over there, it's not a part of the what you weigh and how much you eat is not part of the conversation. It's more like everyone walks everywhere. So it's very different. Their lifestyle is more eating healthier, and they walk. So no one's obsessed with this like big, going to the gym 5 times a week, lifting heavy, because, and I don't know why I felt like I really heard that, because I myself have been on a health and fitness journey for the last year. I'm like, I'm turning this big 40. I gotta just, do it and lift those heavy weights. I'm still motivated and whatnot, but it kind of just like made you again think about the long term, right, with your business, like asking those questions. Why am I working out? Is it like to look a certain way? Is it to actually have longevity? Is it to age well? Like, what is the reason that I'm doing all of this? So
and that's actually an example I use a lot when I talk about like that toddler test, because we see it with fitness too. I want to go to the gym 5 days a week. Okay, but why? And you're like, I want to be fit, or I want to be healthy. And it's like, well, what do you actually mean by that? And is it that, because again, 2 people could have 2 different reasons. It could be, my clothes don't fit me right anymore. Well, could buying new clothes solve that for you? Or would you then feel, well, I still don't feel like as healthy as I want to feel? Great. Okay, well, we're going a level deeper, right? And continuing until you have that answer. Because if you do just like, I want to take better care of my body, maybe it's not 5 workouts a week, right? Like maybe that's actually going to do more harm than good, especially if you don't have capacity for the other things like nutrition, or like maybe you need to be starting with booking a massage once a month, right? Like
absolutely.
Really getting to the root of it, and then you can build and not just end up in that spot where you're like, okay, I just like built this whole habit system or whatever.
Yeah,
it
it's
might
like
be.
working from inwards to outwards versus the opposite. And I think that now we have so much information. It's also very confusing, I'll be honest. I'm confused all the time.
That's how
I'm like, I thought avocados were good. I thought 1 tablespoon.
Oh yeah, everything's good
so
and
like,
bad. This supplement saved me. Don't put this supplement in your body. You're like,
yeah,
I
we're
can't.
all an expert at something, right? But
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's true. I appreciate you sharing that because I think we're all working on something. It's very important to share. I want to know what you're building, just so the audience understands which direction you're headed in, where to find you. So share that. And then I have one last question for you.
Okay, so I'm at Mallory Rowan on most things. Instagram is my main. Kind of around on TikTok, MalloryRowan.com for my website. If you were curious about any of my business offerings, that's all on the website. And then, as I mentioned, my partner and I are relaunching the In-Betweeners, which is really the thing I'm excited about building, having even more of this voice of like, how do we do these things differently? How do we have these conversations? Leading with personal finance as the tool to do it, but really building off those habits and all of that. And then also this year, I am building more speaking opportunities. I really want to bring this message to more people. I really think so many people need to hear that like we can have that kind of permission to let go and build what we actually want to build. So
and you've been doing that. I've been seeing you speak a lot at different places, which is
great. It's been really fun.
So my last question to you is, what is a wealthy life for you?
I think what comes to mind right when you say it is like full of experiences. Yeah, not getting too caught up in the build, especially as someone that wants to build for tomorrow. Like I say, build for tomorrow, but live for today. So I think actually making sure you're still having those experiences along the way.
Thank you for coming on the podcast,
Thank
Mallory
you.
Rowan.